What's up, y'all? Coast to Coast Podcast coming at you. I'm Joey Powell for InsideCarolina.com. We are brought to you by Johnny T-Shirt and Congruity. And we are your favorite podcast, in case you forgot. With me, as always, Sherrell McMillan, Sean Moran. We're going to talk a little Tar Heel basketball with you. Guys, I think the first things first, it's pretty obvious North Carolina got two more wins that they needed to have. The offense continues to improve. The defense, sure. I guess I'll ask you the same way we've done the last couple of weeks, and I think this format's working well. Sean, I'll come to you first. What's your biggest takeaway from this past week for Carolina basketball?
Well, I think getting to this week, looking at the schedule, I think everybody knew that they would have to win out, but the question mark, could they do it, was pretty significant. And I think they've offensively have played exceptionally well over these few weeks. You know, defensively have not as much, but I think part of that is the scoring that they've put on. I think for me, it's been the consistency that they've showed over these games. And once again, I know we're talking about ACC teams that have been in the 100-plus ranking. Florida State was probably the best team in the 80s, but at the same time, in conference games, it's still tough in late February now into March. So to me, it's been the consistency, and then I'm sure a few teams will hit on the improved three-point shooting, the offensive rebounding. So two factors that we talked about going into the Clemson game and after the Clemson game in terms of staples of past UNC offensive that just have not been there, and they've completely flipped around from that perspective. And then also just more from how everybody's playing together, the quickness, the decisiveness, the ball movement. So everything that we all hated during the year from offensive standpoint has looked really good, but obviously going into two very important games this week because they still are on the outside looking in right now.
Yeah, don't jump ahead on my rep sheet, bro. I think Sean hit on a couple things there. Absolutely, I think the ball movement and the continuity, and that's a word that Hubert Davis uses a lot, but the ball movement is just absolutely night and day different than what we saw even 4 weeks ago. You know, there are still one or two times a game where the Tar Heels will absolutely dribble the ball, dribble the air out of the ball and look to put up a bad shot. But for the most part, it's looked a lot more planned. Guys are decisive. It's not getting stuck, and you're getting production from a lot of different places. We'll touch on that in a second. Sherrell, same thing, man. First impressions from the past week after North Carolina goes and wins at Florida State, which has been a bit of a pseudo house of horrors, or at least a house of craziness in the not-so-recent past, and then also winning at home against what looks just like a get-me-the-hell-out-of-here Miami team right now.
Yeah, business-like the title of the episode. They're doing what they have to do. In my mind, so we came after the Clemson game and after they beat Syracuse, we came on that Sunday, and I was just like, maybe they can win 5 in a row, maybe not. But what has this team shown us to prove that they can win 5 in a row? They haven't shown us anything. And I think offensively now they have made a change, like you said, decisive. The ball is moving, everything looks crisper, and there's been, like we said before, regression to the mean on them shooting because they shot so bad. I would say the first 13 games of the ACC season, 14 games, and they've really been pretty solid around the board, shooting from three during the streak. But the way I looked at it the whole time was basically, okay, you lose to Clemson, you've got 6 games before you get to Duke, which is the same amount it would take to win an NCAA championship. So in my mind, you have to win an in-season tournament essentially to get the right to play for one game and you're in essentially. And they won 5 of those. So, Tuesday night to me is kind of like the culmination, kind of almost a championship game. If you can win that game, then they have won the right to have one game to get them into the NCAA tournament. Now, that's not what you would have wanted 4 months ago, one game to get in, because it's like, well, they should have enough wins where they're going to be in. But at least to get the opportunity, they've almost finished it off. But, we'll talk about it. Virginia Tech is not they're another one of those bad teams that has enough that it can get you if you just, are a step off. They came back from down big against Syracuse and scored, I think, 100 points in overtime. So they can score, which is not great for UNC considering how bad they played defense. But again, business-like, they got to the point where they're in the championship game for the right to play for the tournament, and that's all you can ask for.
Yeah, I think that a lot of folks looked after that Clemson game and had the same kind of reactions that we did about really like what makes you think they're going to pull this out? What makes you think they can string together this many games? An independent of opponent, as you said, they have been able to win games. I mean, I think going back and looking in late January, they were losing to teams like Stanford and like Wake Forest, and that's where a lot of us didn't have the faith that they could pull off and come win 5 or 6 in a row coming into the Duke game. I think it's been really refreshing to see how they've kind of stuck with things. They've found things that are working, and they're still doing those things that are working. One of the most attractive things looking at them now is that they're getting scoring from different places. We've talked about Jae'Lyn Withers' resurgence and the fact that now he seems to be hitting at least 2 threes a game. He's not throwing the ball away. He's not catching the ball on the block and not having any clue what he's going to do with it. He's not driving in without any sort of plan. So he's really totally almost taken a 180 here. But more importantly, I'm seeing some real value and consistency from Ven Allen Lubin. And it's not that he's bossing guys. It's just that he's giving you really, really good post attempts. His percentage is incredibly high, and he finished with 19 after the game against Miami. Sherrell, is there something that could have been done differently to get Lubin kind of into this stride? Is it all a result of weaker competition? Because I don't even know that matters, because if you look at how big Florida State is across the board, he still fared decently well against them. And you just see a guy right now that's really confident in his offensive moves, and he's given North Carolina such a stabilizing presence down there.
I feel like it comes down to trust. We always say that's the currency in which coaches operate, but I think players operated in it just as much. And no matter how much you do during the summer, how many bonding trips you have, how much pickup you have, when it gets into the heat of the moment, you're not really sure how someone's going to react. And to be 100% candid, I don't think Ven Allen Lubin responded the way that his guards wanted him to at the beginning of the season. So when that happens, you're less likely to try to fit that pass in. You're less likely to give him a paint touch. But sometime, I would say within the last 10 games, he started converting on that. Maybe it was Stanford. I think Stanford was, we keep going back to that, was the game they gave him 5 or 6 shots in the first maybe 4 or 5 minutes.
But once the second half, they just fed him straight like 5 or 6 possessions.
Yeah, and that seems to be a theme actually throughout this run, is that the second half he starts off really, really hot. But I think once he proved that he could make those catches, that he could make those finishes, he's shooting close to 70% from the field, that he wants to dunk everything. Once they saw that, then they were more willing to give him the ball in those situations. So for me, it seems like it's more of a trust issue, not just with the coaching staff, but also with his teammates, because he's shown now that he's reliable, that you can depend on him, and that if he gets the ball in the paint, more than likely it's going to be 2 points.
It's really, like, I think the trust is something too. And I reached out to Trevor, and I probably way too long to do it, but Trevor Marks, just really, really good film analyst online. If you're not following me, does a lot of things for Inside Carolina too. But I reached out to Trevor. There's a play that North Carolina has employed in 3 of the last 4 games, some of them multiple times in the course of a game, where there is a quick little, almost a dribble handoff between Ven Allen Lubin and Elliot Cadeau right inside the free throw line. And they both, like, literally, they almost brush shoulders after they do it. And then something happens, and I haven't watched it. I haven't cut a tape enough to watch it, and that's why I was reaching out to Trevor. But there's something happens right after it that where the defense just every time gets lost, and it ends up being a little alley-oop, like, shove from Cadeau to Lubin. And that's become so pretty, and North Carolina's doing it with efficiency. Go ahead, Sherrell.
It's the play that they ran against Wake Forest that Sean talked about how beautiful it was. It's that same play.
I just don't know what it's called.
I believe, if you're one of those people who knows film and stuff and knows ball, I'm sorry, but I believe that it actually is the blind pig action, whatever that is. Yeah.
Okay. All right. Well, either way, it's become an absolute find for Hubert Davis and for Elliot Cadeau, because every time they do it, it happens so quickly that once the defender realizes what's happened, Lubin's catching a dunk. And I love that North Carolina has found a way to spam that in a way that's not only kind of getting Lubin involved, but it's making Cadeau, I think, feel a little more free, and that feels like more of his wheelhouse and the type of guard that he wants to run. Sean, one of the things I want to ask you too, I saw North Carolina throw a zone out recently. on multiple scenarios and almost for a full first half, and I'll be damned if it didn't work. I don't know that it was a good zone, but it served its purpose in a sense that it stopped the opponent from getting straight line drives to the rim. Is that something you thought we would be talking about even 2 weeks ago when we were scratching our heads trying to say what can they do differently?
I think it's shown a little more flexibility from the coaching staff. I felt they've been very stubborn in general in not wanting to change or do new things. So to me, throwing the zone against Florida State, they went to it, and at that time, Ewan was just causing havoc before he went out. And when you look at the overall stats of that game, I didn't look at Miami, but the zone from a points per possession didn't do great. But I think it did kind of change up the flow, and I think UNC has got a little more comfortable with it. So it's not something that I think you want to rely on this week, but I have enjoyed the change of pace as well as mixing it up a little bit more in the full court in different scenarios. Even if teams are getting certain shots out of it, I do like the change of pace, and I think it also plays to the personnel, just given some of the depth that they do have. And I think taking that and offensively going back to what you guys are talking about, not just Cadeau and Ven Allen Lubin, but I think you are seeing a lot more movement of 3-4 players at the same time, so that there aren't as many of these 8 seconds left and you have RJ going one-on-one or somebody going one-on-one. So I think there is a lot more just general movement that you've been noticing, and I think it has resulted in almost decrease. We talked about at Syracuse how many times they were going 3 possessions or more without scoring, and that number had significantly dropped in that game, and you've seen that continue. And I think in the first half against Miami, it was only twice. I don't think maybe once in the second half. So I think, to me, taking that question, but overall the flexibility from the coaching staff to try different things and react to that.
Yeah, good feedback. Something else, and again, I didn't think we'd be talking about a zone working, but North Carolina, I think, and I don't have the box in front of me right now, North Carolina had 6 guys in double figures against Miami. Again, strength of opponent, regardless. North Carolina getting the ball to that many guys and having that many guys involved, I think, is probably one of those nice benefits that you want to have if you're going to do something in the postseason, assuming they get to the postseason, which again is not a sure thing by any means. Sherrell, can you speak to a little bit of why getting more guys involved at a time where we've said Hubert Davis needs to just F everybody's feelings? Now all of a sudden it looks like the guys have more cohesion than they've had. We talked about Joy recently. But I'm seeing guys that are contributing in many different ways. I mean, Seth Trimble's stepping back and hitting threes against Miami. It looks like the team's playing with more confidence, not as individuals, but as a team of different guys.
Yeah, confidence is a strong drug, as they say, and you're probably seeing some of the impact. And that's why there's a conversation to be had about how UNC schedules, because it's very hard to get confidence when you have Kansas, Alabama, Dayton, Auburn, Florida, UCLA within the first 6 weeks of the season. So that's a conversation for another day. But I think when you play this level of team and you're able to I don't want to say try some things out, but you're able to work things out on the court, it makes it a lot easier when you get into some of these tougher games, because you say, oh, I can do that. I've done that before. Whereas at the beginning of the season, they really hadn't done it. They weren't able to get over their hump. They weren't able to win kind of those games. They weren't able to, if they were up 5 with 3 minutes left, they weren't able to do that. If they had a lead of 8, they weren't able to push it to 16. So I do think it's a lot of confidence, and it's going to help. They have at minimum 3 games left this season, at minimum. And it's going to help in those 3 games, because how many times have we said on here, like, oh man, RJ Davis just can't do it by himself, or Ian Jackson can't be the scorer by himself. And when you get to Tuesday, obviously Virginia Tech and Carolina haven't played this season, but if Virginia Tech and Carolina played in January, they'd been like, well, just watch out for Jackson, watch out for Davis, and everything else should be fine. That would have been pretty much the scouting report from a defensive standpoint. But now it's like you've got Withers in the corner, Drake Powell's hitting threes, Jackson's coming off the bench and kind of being a microwave guy. Trimble was rounding into the form that he was in November. RJ Davis is He's improving. He's still getting to the free throw line and making free throws, and Elliot Cadeau is driving, and now Ven Allen Lubin is dunking everything. So it's much different than it was a couple of months ago. And so now Virginia Tech is going to go in a little more concerned about the whole team, which, as we talked about ad nauseum over the last 5 or 6 months, opens everything up for everybody else offensively. So I think that's why it's important. But we'll just have to see if it carries over to Tuesday.
I want to ask you both this, and it's kind of a weird question, but I think folks that are listening to us and watching us will understand what I'm getting at. Seeing this, this adjustment and seeing things start to click, again, independent of opponent caliber, you're seeing this team do things on their own that they want to do that they haven't done well all year until now. Does it make you more frustrated that maybe the switch didn't flip earlier this year, or is it one of those we're just glad that it's flipped now? Sean, I'll put you on the spot first, and I'm going to ask Sherrell the same thing.
I'm glad it did flip, and it definitely has made watching pretty enjoyable, watching the flow versus the frustration. I think asking for it at the beginning of the season, unrealistic, but yeah, it would have been nice earlier where you're getting a win at Pitt or at Wake, definitely, because I think right now when you look at, and once again, with numbers you can jerry rig them to what the point you're trying to make a lot of times, but if you do look at what they've done since that Clemson game, they're playing like a top 25 team. Offensively, they're top 5, just from an efficiency standpoint. And once again, I think the 3-point numbers, as Sherrell said, were so poor early on, probably not going to keep up this 46% rate. But between 3-point shooting and offensive rebounding, especially the offensive rebounding, I mean, to me, that has been the key where they're putting right now. From that time, they've been number 2 in the country from offensive rebounding percentage perspective. And when you're going through the game log and you're seeing, okay, how many possessions did they go scoreless? Even if they're missing shots, just getting those extra attempts, especially when you are shooting as well as they have been from inside the arc, and now you're adding that 3-point percentage. So, I wouldn't say frustrated, but it's enjoyable. Just wish it had happened a little bit sooner, just given that they have to win there's no margin of error. They have to win at Tech. They have to probably beat Duke or play extremely competitive, and then win a tough game in the tournament. And to me, if they don't get in, would be a little frustrating knowing that they're playing better than a lot of other teams right now.
Yeah, that's the other thing is a lot of those teams that are crowded around the bubble right now they're garbage now versus being garbage 4 to 6 weeks ago.
Which, not to sidetrack it, but goes to probably a point of, hey, if they were to play a Big Ten team right now, or they're to play a Big 12 team right now, UNC as well as a lot of other teams, could make a change, similar to Duke beating Illinois by 50 points. But you're kind of stuck with what you did and what the conference did back in November and December, and there's no really getting out of it except for beating a top 3 team, which is, I think, this year that top 3 is probably a little different than in years past as well.
Which, again, goes back to that schedule talk. It's great to be like, oh, we're going to challenge ourselves and we're going to play all these tough teams, but you got to win some of them. And that was the issue back in 2022, 2023, and that's the issue this year. You can't schedule that way and then not have wins, because it's going to be a cinder block, bringing you down beneath the waters for the rest of the season.
Yeah, so Sherrell, I want to ask you the same question I threw at Sean, but I want to ask you to maybe take a little different perspective on it. Which begat the other? Was it Hubert Davis showing trust in some guys to play more guys and switch up the lineups, or was it that the lineup started playing in a way that earned Hubert Davis's trust so that he could play more guys?
That is a great question. I was prepared to answer in a different way. I think it's probably the lineups earned his trust more than anything, because he's tried everything, I think, this season, from the freshmen to 4 guards to 3 guards and 2 bigs who aren't starting now. He's tried everything, like a whole bunch of different combinations. So I think once, and again, everybody forgets, this lineup that everybody's praising started against Clemson and got annihilated. So let's make sure we keep that data point in there. But he stuck with that just because, I guess he thought it was what was the guys who were practicing best, and he needed some shooting out of that 4 spot. and that allowed Drake to move over. You bring Ian off the bench as a microwave, and the pieces just kind of fit. So it is a combination of, again, the schedule. We cannot downplay that because it's not, they haven't played the best competition, but they still did what they're supposed to do. And the fact that, they did earn, Hubert Davis's trust. I think those are the big things. As far as me, when it comes to like frustrated or whatever, my favorite saying when it comes, I'm almost a consequentialist, almost. I'm not quite there yet, but I'm getting close. But what is more important than how? Like, who cares that, how they're playing better? The fact is that they are. And just from a selfish standpoint, it would have been awful to have to cover this UNC team if they had lost, 3 or 4 of these past few games. Like the tenor and the color of everything would have been very not fun. Let's just put it that way. So
I mean, full confession, we were talking about this offline about like what the hell we were going to do.
Yeah. Well,
if the things didn't slightly correct.
Right. So for me, it's just like selfishly, I'm glad they started to pull it together. So at least they have a right on Tuesday to earn a win, to have a chance to be in the tournament. And that's probably more than I expected from them, like I said, 3 weeks ago.
Yeah. And again, this isn't the standard that North Carolina wants to set for itself. This is not what they're, hoping to do or hoping to be is a team that's chasing it in March. But there are some salvageable things that I think, if you really want to be objective and look for positives here, I think that there are plenty to choose from. It's almost like shopping a Johnny T-shirt. Like there's just plenty of positives to choose from there. You walk in and you're almost overwhelmed by the depth of the selection. Want to talk about lineups. I mean, Johnny T-shirt can outfit you from here until next Ramadan and have you just in looking head to toe like open casket sharp. And so I would strongly encourage that you go see Johnny T-shirt. I'm gonna give a shout out to the baseball team, Scott Forbes and those guys, 12-0 with a 10-2 Coastal Carolina team coming in Tuesday. If you're in Chapel Hill at the Bosch, as a lot of people were this past weekend, go buy Johnny T-shirt. Get you some gear. Let Johnny T-shirt take care of you. Use that code that you can find on the premium message boards, and they will absolutely take care of you, and you'll be glad that you talked to them. Johnny T-shirt, we love them. We appreciate that they support us, and we hope you guys will support them. If you're listening to this on the audio format, there will be some national ads that come right in here after this segment. If you're watching this on video, hey, hang around. Nothing's going to change for you. You're just going to hear me talking about national ads. We appreciate you being a part of the Coast to Coast podcast here on Inside Carolina. So, fellas, as we move on from the wins over Florida State and Miami, we've all teased it a little bit. This Tuesday night at Castle Coliseum in Blacksburg against a Virginia Tech team that has been pretty bad this year. I don't think it's, they're like a lot of teams in the ACC, and they're just kind of down. But as we've seen, that is also a place that you can't just go in and put on the North Carolina jersey and win a ball game. And you know that their fans are going to be up to play against Carolina. They're going to be excited because it's their senior night. Sherrell, what do you expect out of the game against Virginia Tech this coming week?
This is another throw the kitchen sink at the game and try to figure out how to get one more point than Virginia Tech. That's really all there is to expect. They have some guys who have played well against UNC in the past, but they have struggled as a whole as a team. I think their ball handling is a little suspect. So this is a game where I personally would kind of sick Seth Trimble on whoever is the primary ball handler and let him just kind of, do his thing and try to get a few steals and extra possessions. But they can be a very good shooting team. They can be a really good offensive team. And we know the coach, he has game planned against better UNC teams, really strong performances. So when you have a good coach who's coming off an emotional win on senior night with a chance to really wreck UNC's season, UNC's gonna have to go in there and match the energy level of Virginia Tech, because I would imagine it's pretty high. Like you said, this has not been a great season for them, and this is kind of a chance. I don't want to say a signature win, but a really strong way to go into the offseason. I think they're eligible for the ACC tournament, but this would be a strong way for them to go into the weekend and then into the ACC tournament.
Yeah, for sure. Just give some folks a snapshot of Virginia Tech right now. They're 13-16 on the year. Just haven't been great. They're averaging about 70 points a game. They're giving up about 72 and change. Just not a lot of things that they do incredibly well. But again, I think this is going to be more about North Carolina focusing on themselves and focusing on that environment. Sean, I don't know if you've had a chance to see Virginia Tech this year, but we talked. Sherrell mentioned their coach has prepped for better Carolina teams than this. What do you expect to see from them defensively? Is it going to be more of a trying to jam up RJ and Ian, or do you think they're going to maybe take a different approach?
I mean, from a defensive standpoint, slow and physical, I think have been staples of Virginia Tech. It's always been a hard place to play. Out in the middle of nowhere, dark coliseum. The rims always feel a little tight. So yeah, I would once again, I think this one, every game has felt a little scary, except for maybe the Miami and Cal games to an extent. But this one certainly does, and I'd say more offensively. They're a top 40 team from three. So I think at the end of the game, you can look at the box score and see, that might be probably the most telling stat of all in terms of how teams are shooting from the outside. But yeah, defensively, I think they'll try to attack RJ and Elliott early. I still remember a few years ago when they tried to go right at Brady Manick right off the bat, 2 or 3 possessions in a row. It didn't work, and that kind of opened up a lot for UNC. But they're gonna, I think those first 1 to 3 possessions, they're gonna have a specific target to try and attack on because, as Sherrell said, they do have a pretty good coaching staff. They've been a little undermanned, but they should be fully healthy for the game on Tuesday. So it'll be tough, and they got the win. Louisville, they played Louisville tough at home. They played SMU tough at home. So it will be a tough one, and could be devastating for UNC if they end up on the wrong side. But hopefully they can, similar to when they got out of there with a win a few years ago, play smart enough, reduce the turnovers, and I think once again offensively move the ball crisply and get the ball down low as well as out to the open shooters.
Yeah, and I would say just beware Jaden Young. He is the classic kid from North Carolina who didn't get a UNC offer, who is really turning it on. I think he had 10 straight games where he didn't score in double figures, and then he's been at 26 or more in 2 of the last 3. He had 26 in their win over Syracuse on Saturday and 27 against Miami last week. So just beware of him. That might be where Seth Trimble spends a lot of his time.
Well, and more importantly, they've got Big Papa Pump's nephew or kid or whatever it is, Scott Steiner's. I think it's Scott Steiner's son or his nephew. Is that
I think
actually
it's his nephew.
Nephew, yeah.
I think it's his
So
nephew,
maybe it's Rick's son, Brandon Rex Steiner. For those of you old WCW heads, you'll see that name. He does play a little bit for VT. He's not a star, but he does play fairly regularly. I don't know if he's going to come out there and talk about all his freaks and do some Steiner math and wear the chainmail headgear or not. But either way, just something to make a nice little connection for listeners of a certain age.
You think
Go ahead,
he's the
Sherrell.
hookup?
You were going to say something.
You
If
think
he
he's
is,
the hookup?
if he is, I would assume that folks will holler if and when they hear him, just because that's what one does. Guys, so
Sean is looking at us like, what are you guys talking about?
He just gave it. The train left, and he was just cool with it. He's like, all right, fine, I'll get an Uber. Guys, looking towards Saturday, rivalry with Duke. I can't remember what writer it was that was so butthurt about Duke bringing game day to Chapel Hill. It was one of the national guys that always tries to take a shot at things. But, I want to see what you guys think about this Duke matchup. I'm not going to ask you to give us a ton of insight because I still think it's a terrible matchup for North Carolina. I know Tyrese Proctor's battling through an injury right now, but still just the size is something North Carolina struggles with. But that said, Sherrell, this is a different team offensively perhaps than they were when they played at Duke. I don't know that changes the outcome, but could it potentially change the way things look? And Sean, I'm going to ask you a slightly different question about next Saturday, but I want to throw it at Sherrell first.
Yeah, it could change. Again, confidence is a crazy thing. We've seen this happen before where the first game is kind of a blowout, not just under Hubert Davis, but the first game is not competitive. And the second game, a UNC team that has gotten better, that's improved steadily, puts up a bigger fight. Now, this is a team, we talked about with Duke that's much taller, stronger, I would say more athletic, kind of across the board. But Malik Brown, I'm not sure of his status, and Tyrese Proctor, not sure of his status. And one of the key things, I guess, since Proctor got to Duke, is that he's done a really good job of making things difficult for RJ Davis. And so if he's not in the game, then that, I think Isaiah Evans has been starting in Proctor's stead, and they've been starting Knipple and kind of going that route. I'm curious to see if those guys who are freshmen will be able to agitate RJ in the same way. We've seen so many times over the years in that final Duke game that seniors, knowing this is it for them, have great performances. You think back to Joel Berry. I think he hit 7 threes in the first half.
He was unconscious.
Or his senior night against Duke. Kenny Williams did the same thing. We've just seen a lot of great performances in recent years, and you would think RJ Davis, especially with Proctor out, might have a chance to do that. Overall, though, I think UNC will match up a little bit better. Again, Seth Trimble started the assignment at Duke guarding.
Why you got to bring
Cooper
that up,
Flag.
dude?
No, I'm just saying it shows you the difference. Seth Trimble was starting on Cooper Flag then, and now more than likely that will be Jae'Lyn Withers starting on Cooper Flag, who, while Cooper Flag is obviously a better player, Jae'Lyn Withers has the size and athleticism to at least make things a little harder for him. So that it's a better matchup than it was last time. I still think it would take a Herculean effort for North Carolina to do it, but I'm not like I was last time. Last time we all knew there was no shot. There was no chance that they were going to be in the game, that they were going to cover, that they were going to be close to anything. We all understood that it was going to be bad. This time I think Carolina has a bunch of chance.
Yeah, last time I think it was just a matter of whether or not Duke bought us breakfast in the morning. We could see where that was going. Sean, same thing. I want to ask you, do you feel like North Carolina's ability to score now and the fact that they've gone a little bit taller and they're getting more production from different guys, do you think that might actually, I guess, spread some of the onus out and maybe give the team a little bit more of a little bit less stress and a little bit more seeing it as an opportunity going into the second matchup?
I do think the confidence certainly should help. Once again, when you're even with the injuries, they're still going 6'6", 6'6", and then 6'7", 6'9", 7 feet basically. So they're still putting a monster team together. I think offensively, really felt hopeless on both sides last time for UNC. I think offensively, ideally with their decision making and their crispness, from looking at Joey Powell, he's ready to take a three from the wing or attack off the off the bounce. Same thing with Withers. I think that will be able to give them more consistency to stay within. But it's really going to come down to, talked about offensive rebounding and how well UNC has done. But to me, it's really going to come down to can they keep Duke off the boards. You look at Florida State, and they had over 20 offensive rebounds. So that just fuels them, and when you put a good defense together. So you're going to have to play a pretty perfect game. I do think, to Sherrell's point, the height will help from the forwards and the centers. Obviously, the guards are a little different. I still think they'll play very much off of Cadeau. So you don't want him. I think when he is in rhythm and not thinking, I think he's has turned into a decent shooter so far. But you don't want him just out on an island chucking up shots to start the game, because that'll just get everybody out of whack. But I do think that's something they're definitely going to play off him a little bit with the size. So I think offensively, how they've been moving and the decision making will help. But once again, from a defensive perspective, can you keep them off the boards and off of second chance points? I think will be the main key if this is a game or if it's in that 8 to 10 plus stanza throughout.
And Joey, you know what I'm going to say, because with Isaiah Evans in the starting lineup, I'm sure you're going to say, so what do you do with Cooper Flag? You know what my answer is going to be. You go to Jae'Lyn Withers and you give him a great speech and you say, good luck, son. We love you, and we'll see you on the other side.
Rub him on his shoulders, pat him on his head, and tell him you'll see him tomorrow.
Right. Flag, he's maybe one of the few people who could maybe literally beat you by himself, but I would make him do it, and I would try to exhaust him, running up and down the court, pushing tempo. Don't help, because Isaiah Evans is as good a shooter as there is in the conference. He's tall, so on those closeouts where it might be a 6'2" or 6'3" guy, he's just going to be able to shoot over him. Knipple, He's hasn't been quite as advertised as a shooter, but he's another guy who can get hot. James, again, not doesn't have a reputation as a great shooter, but if you leave him wide open when you're crashing down and doubling on Flag will just look over the top of the guys guarding him and whip a pass in the corner for an open three. So my strategy remains, and I don't think I'll ever change. Maybe this is why I was never a basketball coach. You let Cooper Flag get his 35, his 38, and 15 rebounds or whatever, and you make sure that Isaiah Evans and Knipple and Caleb Foster and Zion James and those guys don't beat you. That to me is how you have to play against Duke, because Flag's going to get his. You just can't leave guys wide open to get into rhythm to hit threes.
One quick last comment on that. I mean, I think Duke took advantage of the switching that UNC did the first time, and it wasn't just the switching; it was the lack of attention and focus that the players had after that first switch or after you did the first thing. So I know that the defensive numbers haven't been great, but I think for the most part they have been a lot more locked in, and when they are switching, they're understanding what each player is doing a little bit more. So to me, that's the other thing with the offensive rebounding on Duke's side. Are they making sure they're not just giving up easy baskets because of breakdowns defensively? And if you're forcing a tough shot and they're hitting it, you have to live with that, but you don't want to just give them easy open runs to the rim or wide open threes. So the more that they can make life difficult, the more challenging things will be.
I think I think it'll be interesting to watch, Sherrell's point about letting Cooper Flag beat you, because the announcers are going to talk about it like he's beating you anyway. So let him go nuts. He's an amazing player. I'm not taking anything away from him. Let him do his thing and see what happens. But yeah, I like the old idea of telling good old Jay Witt, come back with your shield or on it, and seeing what happens next. So guys, let's put a bow on the preview game talk. I'll give you guys the same question I gave you last week. With the 2 new wins, scale of 1 to 10, with 1 being not a chance in hell and 10 being stone cold lead pipe lock, North Carolina getting into the NCAA tournament. Sean, 1 to 10, where are you sitting?
Trying to remember what I said last week. I think
you were 4.
44.
Yeah.
I'll go 4.9 right now.
Not quite going 5?
Not quite going 5. Once again, they big week ahead of them. Have liked how they've been playing. It's been such a hurdle, and I think that quad 1 record, even though to me I hate it just because quad 1 can mean so many different things, but I do think that talking point, similar to 2 years ago, right now is kind of the nail in the coffin. Even though they've been playing certainly like a top 25 team, it's just that larger resume I think will be the hurdle.
Yeah, it's weird. I mean,
it.
Well, I get really frustrated in a sense that you hear all this stuff about the net and how you play and yada yada. And I can't believe I just said the NET word, but you hear all this discussion about it. It's like, well, why are you even playing games at this point of the year if who you play doesn't change anything? Just forfeit the game, because if you're playing a game and winning and it's dropping you, forfeit the game. Again, I know that's not realistic, but it just goes to show you how head scratching some of the metrics and the narratives are right now. Sherrell, same question, 1 to 10.
Real quick before I answer that, there was a team in the Big 12 who lost on Saturday against a really another good team, and they
said
moved
team
up
has
7.
won. Said team has won 4 games in their conference this year.
Well,
no, you're talking about?
Yeah, no, not that one.
Oh,
but this
okay.
team moved up 7 spots in net after a loss to a really good team. So,
well, which one was that?
I'd rather not say. I don't want to impugn
it's not their
anybody.
podcast.
Yeah.
But I get the point. Like, it's just that the narratives and the math don't math right now. Go ahead, Sherrell.
Yeah. So I'm at a 5 because I think if you find a way to win Tuesday, and like we talked about, that you win the championship for the right to play for a chance to go to the tournament on Saturday, that's all you can ask for, considering where they were a month ago. And I think these guys can seize on it. It is one of the worst matchups against Duke in some time, even with the lineup change. But we've seen stranger things happen, and one thing we know for sure is that the building will be out of control. It'll be loud, and if UNC is able to just either take the reins early or just hang in there and hang around, then I think the crowd will give them a pretty big boost. So, assuming they don't just wet their pants on Tuesday and win the game at Virginia Tech, I think it's a toss-up because I do think if they close out the regular season with 2 wins, I think that's enough for them to be in the tournament, especially beating essentially maybe the number 1 overall seed, depending on how things go.
If they find a way to beat Duke, I don't think we're having this conversation, regardless of what happens in the ACC tournament.
Right. So I'm at a 5, but I think in a weird way, this is going to sound crazy. Tuesday's game is almost more dangerous than Saturday's game, not because it's a look ahead, but just because they're in a good rhythm and they finally feel like, okay, we're hitting our stride. This is our chance, and now they have to go on the road after beating a Miami team that they kind of. I want to say they sleptwalked through, but they didn't play a full 40 minutes of basketball.
It feels like a mid-season. It feels like a mid-season Carolina football game against a lesser opponent.
It's the Virginia game. They're 7-0, and here comes raggedy Virginia down. Oh, they're going to beat them, and
they're going to beat them by 900 points. Yeah,
right. And then you're like, what? Tuesday night, you're like, what happened?
What just happened?
So you just gotta find a way, man. Because if they lose on Tuesday, everything they've done the last 3 weeks is gone. It's a race. It's like it didn't matter.
Yep.
So you can't allow yourself to lose on Tuesday. You have to find a way, like by any means necessary. And then you can breathe on Wednesday and Thursday, knowing that, hey, we can play free. We can
play
do
free.
Whatever.
That's the word I was looking for.
You can play free because, if you beat Duke, then you're going to the tournament. Let's just go out there and beat Duke. It sounds easier, but that's the message that you can give your team. But if you lose on Tuesday, that confidence that we've been talking about, I don't know that it's going to be at the same level, and then you can get embarrassed again.
It's like Squid Games where you're taking a step, hoping the window doesn't break, and that's what the ACC unfortunately has been. So hopefully it doesn't break against Virginia Tech.
Yeah, I don't even like squid. I don't know anything about this squid game you're speaking of. All right, guys, let's talk a little recruiting before we get out of here. I saw Sherrell that there was a really tall young man from Northern Nash High School in Rocky Mount at the Smith Center on Saturday. What do you know about C.J. Rosser, and can you give us a brief introduction to the young man?
Yeah, C.J. Rosser is a 6'9"-ish forward, like you said, from Northern Nash. He's in the class of 27, which is hard to believe that we're kind of there. They are sophomores, and he's the first player in that class to pick up an offer from UNC. He got it after the game on Saturday. This was his second trip. He was up for the Pitt game, I believe. That could be wrong. Don't hold me to that. But he was. This is his second visit. No, he was at the Alabama game, I think it was. This is his second visit to UNC, and Marcus Page, assistant coach Marcus Page, is actually his lead recruiter and had been down in Northern Nash and talked to the family, and they've just established a good relationship, and UNC decided that it was time to offer him. He slots as kind of your, I would say traditional, but kind of slots as a combo forward. People love the skill he has right now and his shot-making ability, but I think with any 15-year-old, he's only 15, there's a ton of growth that can happen.
And he's 6'9", and he's 15.
He's 6'9", he's 15. And in the early initial 2027 rankings, 24/7 Sports has him as the number 2 overall prospect in the country. So we're talking about someone who is held in high esteem. He's also on the USA basketball circuit. He'll be going to the Final Four for their mini camp next month. But yeah, just it was time for an offer, I guess, for him. And we talked to his high school coach. You can check out that story. It's free on IC. And then we've talked to him and to his mom. And by the time you listen to this, that might be posted.
Appreciate the heads up there. Again, check the stuff out from Sherrell. It's you're not going to find anything more in depth about UNC recruiting than what Inside Carolina puts out, specifically Sherrell and then Sean with his video previews. Sherrell, real quick, this might be a bit of an aside, so if it makes you uncomfortable, I'll own that. Any ideas if the new GM, Jim Tanner, was involved with not only meeting Rosser, but is he involved in the Scholastic scholarship offer process or no?
He was in the room along with Hubert Davis and the other coaches when the offer was given. So he's around, and he talked to Rosser and he talked to Rosser's mom, and they definitely thought it was a good thing.
That's good. I appreciate that. I know. Only reason I ask because I know folks are.
They being the family.
Oh, sure. Only reason I ask is I know folks, in the chat and on the message boards probably want to know about how is Tanner fitting in. So I felt like that was an easy question I could ask there. Sean, tell me a little bit about what Caleb Wilson has going on and how it's going to look for the Davidson Day kids here relatively soon.
Well, let I guess Sherrell comment a little bit more on Wilson, but based on a great recap, he's been beating up folks. Right now, I think he has one game left. In terms of Dixon or Dennis, he's out, and then Dixon, they had a tough loss in their WCAC championship game to Paul VI, one that I had predicted Gonzaga. But then they bounced back, winning the DC championship, beating on Sunday night Sidwell Friends with a Caden Lewis, the Kentucky commit that UNC had offered and was looking at. So a good end of their season. Wouldn't be surprised if he's the Washington Post Player of the Year in terms of the DC area, or at least first team. So he had a strong season, and hopefully we'll have a little bit more on him coming up as we go forward into the spring period.
Love it. All right, Sherrell.
That was the official end of the season with the win over Sidwell?
I believe so.
Okay, gotcha.
All right, Sherrell, give me some Caleb Wilson talk.
Yeah, Caleb Wilson, we went down to Georgia, which if you don't know much about Georgia, which I know a little bit, it's Atlanta in the middle and then a lot of stuff. Which it kind of reminds me of our hometown, Joy, where there's Fayetteville is like a little metropolis, and then there's like Stedman and Autryville and Salemburg and Roseboro and Clinton and Spivey's Corner. You're just like, where am I? That was my experience when we drove down there on Friday. I was kind of confused. I was like, I'm in the mountains now.
All of the IGAs and all of the Piggly Wigglies.
Yes. So they hold the private school semifinals at the University of North Georgia. It actually has a really, really nice gym. It was really I was surprised at how nice it was considering where it was. But they won the semifinals fairly easily. They're winning every game 30 to 40 points. And so Wilson, there's not a lot for him to do, but what I liked in watching him, and we'll have more on this later in the week, is that based upon the game plan is kind of how he attacks what he's supposed to do. It's not just like, hey, I'm going to go get my 25 shots because I'm Caleb Wilson. I think he only took 13 shots in the game. This particular game, it was mostly about him distributing, getting, push aheads for easy layups, of him when they came to double, throwing over the top and hitting guys open for threes, because his team's guards were just on a different level than the team they were playing. And then, of course, with how tall he is, the other team, I think their tallest player was 6'4". He was just kind of blocking everything. Like the guys were so intimidated when they would go into the lane because they would see him kind of hovering over him like a little, like a hawk.
No.
Right. About to block their shot. So that was good. He was 1 for 6 from 3, and I wanted to provide context on that in the thread, because people see 1 for 6 from 3 and they're like, oh no, the 4 spot at Carolina is not going to be able to shoot. I didn't see it that way. Like, there's probably 3 of the 6 threes that weren't great shots. He was just kind of trying to stay lathered up and stay in the game during a blowout. But the form looks a lot better than it did last year. It looks consistent. He doesn't jump up in the air and then land 6 feet in front of him. It's kind of in the same spot. It looks like it's regular and it's something he's really worked on. So he's coming along. It's not that like he's a bad player or anything, but you're starting to see as the folks who have, we nitpick. The higher rated guys are, the more we nitpick to try and find things with the game. But it's getting harder and harder to nitpick him because he's developed such a vast skill set that I think he'll really be an impact player at Carolina. And again, offensively, what you can get from him, you're going to get him running the court, finishing really well. There are a couple of times he has really smooth turnaround jump shot that's going to be very hard to block even at the college level. I don't expect him to shoot 45% from 3 or anything, but I think he's going to be capable and he's going to be able to knock down some shots. And then, again, I still think defensively, with the way he attacks the glass and the way he blocks shots, he's going to be an all defensive, first team type player at Carolina next year. And so he goes for the state championship on Wednesday. They play that game in Macon. I forget exactly who they're playing, but if there was a sports book in Georgia for a high school basketball, I'm sure they would be favored by double digits.
I'm sure that there is as well, but go ahead.
There probably is, yeah. It's not legal, but I'm sure there's one somewhere.
Well, I know that folks listening to this show are going to kind of get hot and bothered by that description of of Mr. Wilson, especially, again, not the 1-for-6 as much as it is about his athletic ability and the fact that he still has he's improved his mechanics on his jumper, and the fact that he's just so aggressive defensively. That's something that's always going to be fun, and I think a lot of folks probably will be looking forward to see how quickly he can matriculate and get into Chapel Hill and start working out with the current team. All right, guys, let's put a bow on this show. Sorry for the folks that we didn't take questions tonight, but if you are paying attention, Tommy Ashley and the crew have a spring football preview show coming up right after this on this same YouTube channel. So we're going to try to get out of here and yield to those guys. But while we're doing it, why don't we make sure we do a little love for Congruity? Congruity, as you know, the preferred HR partner of the Coast to Coast podcast. And since the Coast to Coast podcast is your favorite podcast, that means Congruity HR is your favorite podcast, favorite HR provider. We want you to check out Congruity HR. If you run or operate a small or medium-sized business, email the name there at the bottom of the screen. If you're not watching, it's matt@congruityhr.com. He's going to give you a free assessment of your business, and they're going to tell you how Congruity's capabilities can help you save money. He's going to take a lot of time off of your plate, or he's going to give you a lot of time back by taking a lot of the things that suck your time away off your plate, mainly benefits type stuff, payroll, all the back office things that are just a nightmare for a small or medium-sized business manager. Congruity can fix that. They can optimize that. They can help you make some more money by working with them. So send Matt an email, matt@congruityhr, for that small to medium-sized business assessment. It doesn't cost you anything. And worst case scenario, you've met somebody else that appreciates inside Carolina. So he's got to be a good dude, right? All right, guys, 2 pennies. Sherrell, I'm coming to you first. Give me a penny in honor of our 2 cents, brought to you by Congruity HR.
Well, I'm just going to read Trevor Marks' Twitter profile. According to CBB Analytics, UNC has a plus 35 net rating with Drake Powell on the floor and a -2 net rating with Powell on the bench during its 5-game winning streak. So if you're not fluent like me in, I'm saying I'm not fluent in analytics and in advanced stats, UNC is very good with Drake Powell on the floor, and they are mid with him off the floor during this win streak.
No cap. Appreciate it. Sean, give me a penny, please, sir.
Staying on the advanced analytics, once again, if you look at what's happened since the Clemson game, Jae'Lyn Withers, there's a stat box plus minus, which looks at all the different aspects of a box score for the most part, and he's ranked number 12th in the country in that period. His offensive rating is off the charts. Cooper Flagg is number 1 in the country, but he's right behind Broom for Auburn. So
that's saying something.
Yeah. And once again, can it continue? But I think it goes to that confidence that he's been showing the confidence from 3. He's been showing confidence just in other areas. And he's been that guy that stepped up to make sure that if RJ's having a bad game or Ian's having a bad game, there is another consistent player. But a lot of other UNC's players have stepped up as well, so that it has been a well-oiled machine, and hopefully that can continue into this week.
And every time I see him do something and have fun out there, I keep thinking about the fact that Sherrell always wants to talk about the finality of this time of the year. For a 6-year guy like Jae'Lyn Withers, like it probably is extra final because of what he's dealing with, and it's just fun to watch him kind of round into form for this team right now. Guys, I appreciate y'all rounding into form tonight. Shout out to the almost 300 folks that joined us in the live chat on YouTube. Hey, if you ever want to, we try to do these live where our schedules allow, but either way, even if you're listening to us later on in a podcast, we're grateful for you being here. Make sure you smash that like button. Drop us a review if you'd like to. We really appreciate that as well. And shout out to John Siegley for producing. Sherrell for waiting. Dude, I told you I've got a heart out. What do you want, Sherrell?
I want to ask you a question. I'm switching it over. You always ask us.
You're killing me here. All right.
Sunday night, when we're talking about this, what has happened during the week? And me and Sean aren't going to answer. It's yours, and you can close us out.
Well, I have probably not slept much because I'm single parenting this week. I will probably be strung out from that and work, and will be looking forward to my wife returning from her girls' trip to Italy. I'm assuming that's what you're asking about, because there's nothing else in my mind that's going on next week, right?
That's what I was asking about. Exactly.
Okay.
Thanks.
Yeah. I'll probably look much more worse for wear, not with the same beautiful visage that you're seeing right now. But who knows? If I make it here next Sunday, then I will consider that a win. That's right. I'm laying that bar on the floor so that I can get over the bar as best I can. All right. So yeah, if you guys are out there, send some beer and Valium to your boy this week. We appreciate it. Thanks for everybody for being a part of the show. Sherrell, Sean, love you guys. Thanks for the pick me up right here at the end. We will talk to everybody next week on the next edition of the Coast to Coast podcast on InsideCarolina.com. I'm Joey Powell. Late.